The contractor on the construction site wanted us to violate environmental safety regulations and rules. Now the inspector has his ass. So I drive a concrete mixer, and for those unfamiliar with the profession, let me explain cleaning equipment of concrete and all the related rules is a perfect breeding ground for malicious compliance. Portland cement is a nasty, vile thing. It's about two-thirds calcium oxide, also known as quicklime or caustic lime, with a pH of 12.8. If it gets on your skin or in your lungs, it can cause chemical burns. That's why there are strict rules for disposing of water used to clean concrete equipment. The responsibility for providing a washout container lies with the main contractor on the site. This can be either a rented metal tank or a specially equipped pit lined with polyethylene since the water must not seep into the ground. The fine for non-compliance can reach $10,000. Sometimes contractors gain a certain reputation among drivers, rarely a good one because drivers don't talk about good experiences from past jobs. They complain. If a contractor becomes the subject of conversation, it's likely because someone's complaining or warning others. So we come to scas. Dealing with scas was like a bear attack. Afterward, you're left with a headache, confusion, and possibly chlamydia. At our first meeting, he suddenly pulled out his phone and showed me a nude photo of his girlfriend that she'd just sent him. After that, I had an overwhelming urge to grab bleach wipes and scrub everything he touched. When it came time to clean the concrete mixer, he told me to drive a couple of blocks away and just dump the water into the ground, because that area is full of trash and nobody cares. Of course, I didn't do it and passed this valuable information in Skaz's work style to Lex. With his antics, Skaz and Alexa made a terrible impression and earned a bad reputation. A couple of years later, Skaz's company landed a big contract. They were to do earthwork and pour concrete for a local resort. By then, no one wanted to work with this firm, mainly thanks to Skaz. Experienced drivers refused small jobs and set up newbies instead. Unfortunately, this project was too big and profitable to pass up, but we hoped not to deal with Skaz. Appointing him as the manager of such a project was the height of idiocy. Naturally, Skaz was appointed the main site manager, and it just couldn't end well. Problems started literally on the first day of concrete pouring. No washout area was set up. Instead, Skaz dug a pit with an excavator, dumped the concrete water there, and buried it back. This was a blatant violation of the law, but drivers didn't have much choice. It was the hottest time of summer, and no one in their right mind would carry 913 Kilogram buckets up and down stairs in 46-degree heat. Plus, there was no time as we had to deliver large volumes of concrete. The situation peaked around the middle of the project. It was hellishly hot, and Skaz greatly overestimated his team's ability to work in such conditions. Concrete trucks stood idle for hours on site waiting to pour. These batches should have been rejected, and they would have been if an inspector had been there. But Skaz didn't want to reject the concrete because each canceled load cost the company about $1,000. So he ordered drivers to add water to concrete that was already 3 hours old. Normally you can't add water after 90 minutes when concrete starts setting, and in such heat that window should have been cut to 60 minutes. But he demanded we pour the mix anyway. My concrete mixer was second to last in line. The concrete was 4 hours old, and I added over 380 liters of water to keep it fluid way beyond the allowed 115 liters, most of it added after the permissible time. The concrete was so bad it was setting right in the chute during unloading, and workers had to push it with shovels. When I finished unloading and asked where to wash the mixer, Skaz pointed to the trench we'd used earlier, but it was being actively buried by an excavator. Then Skaz told me to go to another pit and wash the mixer there, saying they'd clean it up with the excavator later. I did so, but Skaz didn't know the reason the excavator operator was hurriedly burying the trench was that a city inspector had just arrived on site. In fact, the inspector was standing at the edge of the pit, staring right at me. I decided I'd had enough. Looking the inspector in the eye, I stuck my shovel into the chute, and without breaking eye contact, slowly pushed a small pile of concrete onto the ground. When it hit the soil with a dull thud like a cow patty, the inspector jumped into his car and raced down the slope toward me. Honestly, I wasn't too worried. Technically, I could have been in serious trouble, but the concrete was almost dry and easy to scoop back into the chute. Unless the inspector made a scene, the worst I'd get was a reprimand. He jumped out of his car and started yelling, "What the hell am I doing?" threatening all sorts of environmental penalties. I lightly scooped the concrete lump and it rolled across the ground. Then, with the most convincing innocence I could muster, I explained that the contractor told me to wash here because no washout area was provided on site. The inspector squinted and asked, "Who's my contractor?" When I named Skaz, he started ranting again. Though inspectors are our enemies, whom we're supposed to delay, mislead, and hinder, they're not stupid. They know the game Skaz plays on sites and had warned him multiple times. The inspector looked at the hardening mass in my chute and poked it with his finger. It was solid and hot concrete heats up as it sets. He asked if I had a hammer. I did. He told me to knock out as much concrete as possible and use as little water as possible for washing. Then he got back in his car and headed up, clearly intending to unleash the full wrath of the heavens on Skaz. The inspector didn't find Skaz, who, hearing the inspector yell at me, hid behind the excavator. Instead, he found Jake. Jake, another mixer driver, had been in the profession for 30 years and knew what concrete would do to his drum. He'd dumped his leftover concrete on the ground and was now hosing his tank with a fire hose, hoping the water would loosen the hardening mass inside by the time he got back to the plant. The inspector didn't even glance at the pile. He just asked where Skaz was, and Jake kindly pointed to his hiding spot. When I finally left the site about 45 minutes later, Skaz was on a mini loader trying to break up Jake's massive pile of leftover concrete. The inspector had finally stopped yelling, but decided to check the concrete delivery tickets. Technically, it wasn't his job, but he knew the rules well, what you can and can't do. Driving by, I saw him reviewing papers with a smirk. There was nothing joyful or encouraging in that smile. Even a crocodile would have snapped at it with its predatory jaws. The last 6 or 7 tickets clearly showed excessive water volumes. Several also noted concrete was poured after the allowable time. My and Jake's documents had timestamps confirming water was added past the deadline. It seemed like waves of schadenfreude were radiating from the inspector. In the end, the inspector issued 2 separate violations against the company, one for each truck with the maximum fine, as the violations were deliberate and followed multiple prior warnings. Additionally, the inspector notified the Genius contractor about violations of pouring deadlines and excessive water use. So besides the EPA fines, Skaz's bosses had to demolish and replace 115 cubic meters of concrete. We never saw Skaz again. The second story, the manager tried to force a driver to deliver furniture for pennies and strip him of his livelihood, so I came up with a plan. During my time working at a furniture store warehouse, our clearance section was constantly expanding, so the company hired a dedicated driver to deliver discounted goods to customers. This delivery driver, let's call him John, was just an awesome guy. He'd been in the industry forever, owned 2 trucks, did almost all the heavy lifting, and always found time to chat with me while I helped load his truck. He even brought me beer when it was unbearably hot, and I was working like a dog. He used to work with high-end furniture stores, but when the recession hit and companies started closing or cutting costs, he was left practically jobless. The company I worked for always had problems with delivery drivers because management was stingy and refused to pay market rates. John was willing to make some concessions and took cash payments, which management eagerly exploited. After some issues at the warehouse, I asked John if he had a few shifts for me as his assistant. John immediately agreed since he'd had trouble with lazy workers. I loved the job right away. We started at 4:00 a.m. to deliver orders by 6:00 a.m., and if we planned well, we could finish by 2:30 p.m. I enjoyed the physical labor being on the road and swapping stories with John. He told me about his wife and kids, and I teased him about his goofy scorpion tattoo. Problems started when John began getting delivery route sheets and noticed the prices the manager quoted to customers. To give you context, the store charged $95 for city deliveries, and that was for a full workday with about 20-30 orders. John usually charged a bit more because he had only 5-8 deliveries a day, scattered across the city. John would go to the manager and ask why a customer was charged just $50 to deliver a 3-seater sofa bed to the 6th floor, when it usually cost $110 plus $10 for each floor above the first. The manager would just shrug and say she lowered the delivery price to avoid losing the sale. Sometimes we had to carry a huge sofa to the 7th floor on foot because the client didn't reserve the elevator or the furniture wouldn't fit. We'd carry it up, unpack it, assemble all the sections, clean up the trash, and the client would hand John just $30 in cash. It was humiliating. I remember giving a client the paperwork to sign, and John said he'd wait at the truck. I took the leftover packaging, went down, and sat in the passenger seat. John was trying not to look at me. He was crying. I asked if he was okay, and he broke down a bit, admitting he was barely keeping up with bills. Our company was his only decent-paying contract. The manager constantly screwed him over, and he might soon have to sell his trucks to pay bills. I felt so sorry for this guy. He'd become my friend, and it was obvious he really loved his job. That's when I started hatching a plan based on my understanding of the company's inner workings, the manager, regional director, general director, and the firm as a whole. I took John to a small bar for a drink. We sat at a table and I started explaining my plan together. I asked John why he didn't just give the manager his own price list and start charging fair rates for deliveries. John said, if I do that, the manager said they'd terminate the contract and find someone with acceptable rates. I laughed. Call her right now and quit. I explained that we'd already seen tomorrow's route, a huge load of 10 deliveries, and we knew the manager had set absurdly low prices like $20 per delivery. Listen, any other driver would charge at least $200 for each of those deliveries. No one will agree to work those volumes for pennies. John hesitated, dialed the manager, and put her on speaker. As expected, she got cocky, saying it was better for them without John, and that he'd just lost his biggest contract. John hung up, looking deathly pale and scared. I assured him everything would be fine, checked the time the store closed at 5:00 p.m., and it was only 1:00 p.m. I promised John the manager would call back by 4:00 p.m. While we waited, I suggested John make a list of demands for working with the company. Again, a fixed delivery price set by John himself, the company paying for John's assistant, and fuel costs, extra fees for complex deliveries like balconies or fire escapes. And if the company wanted to terminate the contract, they'd have to notify him in advance. Exactly at 4:30 p.m., John's phone rang. Sure enough, it was the manager. John answered and put her on speaker. In a much more polite voice, she said if John did tomorrow's deliveries, she'd give him a $50 store gift card. I grabbed the phone and hung up. John looked at me in disbelief. I said, when she calls back, you lay out your demands period. 5 minutes later, the phone rang again, the manager. John answered, put her on speaker, and she started talking, but John cut her off. He was nervous at first, but months of pent-up frustration took over, and he firmly and confidently listed all the problems he'd had with the company. The manager laughed at John's demands, and I signaled him to drop the next piece of information. You know perfectly well that no transport company or contract driver will get out of bed for less than $250 per delivery. So either you agree to my terms, or good luck tomorrow. The manager said, "Okay, okay, do tomorrow's deliveries, and then we can." John cut her off. "No, I'm coming to the store now. You'll sign the documents today, then we'll load the truck, and tomorrow we'll deliver everything calmly." He hung up. We drove to the store, and the manager looked absolutely furious. She started ranting that John had cornered her and was practically blackmailing her. I couldn't resist saying John's kids probably want to eat tomorrow, too. John tossed a new contract handwritten in the truck onto the table and said, "Sign it." The manager signed the document and John pulled up to the warehouse. As always, the delivery load was sofas, beds, glass coffee tables, the heaviest furniture the company sold. The manager came out to the warehouse smirking maliciously as we struggled to load incredibly heavy furniture into the truck. When we finally finished, the manager couldn't resist venomous parting comments. "Just to clarify, with this new contract, you still have to complete the deliveries." I asked, "Complete them, huh, manager? Even if the client's not home, you want the furniture left there. You don't want to see these items back at the warehouse." John said, "Done." The next day was simply magnificent. 80% of the furniture didn't fit through clients' doors because the manager hadn't warned them to measure doorways. Clients yelled at us, complained, accused us, saying it was unfair. Deliveries used to cost $20, so why did they have to pay more now? We just laughed and followed the manager's instructions, leaving absolutely all the furniture at the delivery sites. Some furniture we left in hallways, some in doorways, some we just dumped at the front door because clients refused to accept deliveries without paying extra. For those who were polite, paid up front, and appreciated our efforts, we went all out to help get the furniture into their homes, ensuring the best possible service. What happened with John? I left the warehouse after I started landing small acting roles. I eventually got a regular role in a well-known series. While on set, I talked to one of the producers about John, and he got a job transporting props from studio warehouses to the set. After deliveries, John stayed with the night crew, helping set up props and prepare them for the next day's shoot. I see him regularly on the studio lot between takes, and almost every evening after work. He's earning great money, comfortably supporting his family, paying for his kids' education, and, of course, there's always room for a well-deserved cold beer after work. Say that the clients went off on the manager for leaving furniture in doorways and hallways, please. Author: the manager had to personally call clients and explain that she'd misquoted the delivery costs. When clients refused to pay extra, the manager was forced to cover the delivery costs from company funds, which cost her a significant portion of her bonuses. The third story: my clueless boss forced me out of my job, but she had no idea how much work I was doing. This happened in 2017, about a year after I started a new job. For context, at my previous job, I mainly handled expense management for projects in a major bank's branch renovation program across the country. I worked on that program for nearly 10 years, so when a competitor won the contract with that bank, they poached me because of my extensive experience with this client. The salary increase was significant, and the job offer also promised that since the local office was over an hour away, I could work from home when I didn't need to attend meetings or similar events. So in July 2017, I started the new job, and the first 6 months went without incident. I continued doing the same work I'd done for nearly a decade at my previous job. In January 2018, I got a promotion and became responsible not just for individual projects, but for the entire program, managing a team of 5 people. Let's just say those 5 were poorly trained by previous management. Also, these employees were physically located in different cities to handle projects across the country. So most of our communication was via Skype or phone. If I wanted to talk to someone in person, it meant a 2 to 3 hour drive one way. But I tried to use commuting time efficiently working on my laptop on the train. This will be important later. I was thrilled about the career advancement and decided not to focus on the fact that my promotion didn't come with a salary increase. I reasoned, let my results speak for themselves, and then management will have to acknowledge my contributions. Over the next few months, I worked 70, 80 hours a week. My contract required 40 hours, but I didn't mind the overtime because I wanted to prove I deserved the promotion. I also spent a lot of time training my team, and in the end, we achieved good results. But after one particularly successful presentation for the client, for which I even got a bonus, everything started going downhill. The presentation meeting was on a Friday, and the following week, my boss, let's call her Allison, was going on a week-long vacation. Before leaving, she asked me that if her boss contacted me, I should drop everything and immediately handle his task. I agreed and went home calmly for the weekend. The next week, her boss didn't contact me. The following Monday, I was working from home, opened my laptop, and almost immediately got a Skype message from Allison, demanding I come to her office about 2 hours from my home for a meeting tomorrow. I didn't think much of it, since I already went there at least once a week to meet someone from my team. When I arrived at the office the next day, I expected it to be a short meeting where we'd discuss what happened while she was on vacation. But what happened next was complete chaos. She started yelling at me for doing nothing while she was gone, and accused me of deliberately neglecting her instruction to help her boss. I explained that he never contacted me, so I thought the task had been postponed, which wasn't uncommon. She insisted I was negligent, and should have contacted her boss myself if he didn't call first. When I explained I was swamped with unexpected issues, she said I was obligated to do what she asked, and could have delegated my tasks to the team. To avoid further arguments, I said it wouldn't happen again, but I thought to myself it was time to act strictly by the rules. Over the next few months, I kept working hard, but always prioritized her tasks. Some were so trivial she could have done them herself in 15 minutes. If other issues came up during that time, I told the team to forward those questions to the boss, so she could prioritize my work herself. She absolutely hated this, as I was supposed to handle everything myself. In retaliation for my petty compliance with her instructions, she decided that my previous work schedule 3 days a week from home, where I usually worked at least 14 hours, and 2 days in offices 2-3 hours away, leaving at 6:00 a.m., and returning no earlier than 8:00 p.m., was no longer suitable. The conversation went something like this. Allison, you need to work in the office every day. This current schedule causes communication delays. Me, it's not true that there are delays. My local office is over an hour away. Allison, then we'll transfer you to a closer office. Me, there's no closer office. This is the closest one, and sometimes it takes up to 2 hours one way due to traffic or rail strikes. Allison, then you'll work in your local office. Me, if you want me in the office constantly, I won't work overtime anymore. The only reason I work so many hours now is because I work from home. Allison, I don't care. I want you in the office. Me, fine, no problem. 2 months later, I acted strictly according to the agreement, working my required hours. During commutes, I no longer opened my laptop since that was outside working hours. I stopped checking emails after leaving work and started enjoying free evenings again. Allison didn't like this, as all late requests were now simply ignored and often handled with significant delays. Once she sent me an email 1 minute after my workday ended, asking for information for an important morning meeting. Because of when she sent it, I could only provide the data an hour after the meeting started. It gave me particular pleasure to point out the timestamp of her email and remind her of our previous agreement. Because of this treatment, I started looking for a new job. The day I brought her my resignation letter, she met me with the smuggest grin I'd ever seen. I understood that this was all just her way of forcing me out of the job. However, she completely failed to realize how little she knew about my daily tasks. A few days before my departure, we had a handover meeting. I left 2 weeks early because I had unused vacation days. I don't remember the entire meeting, but here's a great example of how it went. Allison. So who handles task A? Me, that's me. Allison in task B. Me, also me. Allison, that too. Me, yup. Allison, and who does C? Me, that's me too. Allison. Wait, you do that too. How do you have time for all this? Me, usually, I do it in the evenings when no one distracts me. It takes a maximum of 2 hours a day. Allison. Okay, but who handles task D while you're doing task A? Me, in those cases, I start earlier, finish A, and then do D. Keep in mind that with each of my answers during this conversation, she got paler, and at some point, I thought she was going to faint. The expression on her face when she realized I'd left her alone with a huge pile of problems was one of the best moments of my life. And the best part, I recently reconnected with a former colleague, and we discussed Allison and the current state of affairs. It turns out that after I left, the entire program came to a standstill because Allison had practically no experience working with this client and poorly understood their requirements. Small problems started turning into giant ones, and resolving them took too much time. Plus, she hadn't adequately trained the person who replaced me. As it turned out, he started just a week after I left, and in the end, the entire program was completely frozen due to all the problems she was responsible for. About 6 months after I left, she was fired, and the thought of that still makes me smile. That's all for today's stories. Thanks for watching this video to the end. I'm waiting for your opinions on them in the comments. Also, check out our previous video, which you'll see here, and good luck to you.